In our previous two videos on toxicity, we discussed chemicals from our environments that may poison us and shorten our lifespan. We began with smoke and combustion products and ethyl alcohol, and moved on to internally generated chemicals, including insulin and cholesterol. We turn now to exposures that are necessary for life, but when present in excess may cause us harm. There are actually hundreds of internally generated proteins and enzymes that may harm us when produced in excess, but we have time here today to touch on only a few of them. One of the most important is iron. This heavy metal is an integral building block of hemoglobin, which is the most important constituent of our red blood cells. Hemoglobin carries oxygen from our lungs to every part of our body and is obviously necessary for life. Without iron, we cannot make hemoglobin, and without hemoglobin, we die. If iron is so important, shouldn't we all just load up on iron so that we can have an abundance of it in our storage shed? The answer to this question is best framed in the question, can too much iron be harmful to us? Because I'm writing on this topic and speaking, you can suspect that the answer to the latter question is a resounding yes. Too much iron can hurt us badly. It turns out that iron is stored in our liver and other organs as a chemical known as ferritin. Ferritin blood levels are an excellent reflection of the total amount of iron stored in our body and available to make hemoglobin and other proteins. All of us absorb iron out of the food in our diet. Some foods are rich in iron, and others contain very little. It turns out that there are many people who absorb too much iron out of their diet and can therefore end up with excessive amounts of iron in the body's storage sites. The disease of excess iron absorption is a genetic disorder called hemochromatosis. Over the past 40 years, I've seen hundreds of individuals who have had this genetic disorder and are therefore at risk of disease because of it. In truth, most of us don't have this type of genetics and don't have to think about it. Nevertheless, there are thousands of individuals who do have excessive iron storage and are slowly sustaining damage to their tissues due to the iron load. Unfortunately, many physicians do not measure ferritin blood levels during their patients' annual examinations. Why is this a problem? Well, it turns out that ferritin iron is stored predominantly in our liver, our heart muscle, and our pancreas. When the iron storage is excessive, these tissues become damaged, resulting in cirrhosis of the liver, congestive heart failure, and diabetes. I have over the years seen many individuals who have come to my office with these organ failures only to find out that the cause was too much iron stored in the liver, the pancreas, or the heart. It is important, therefore, for us to know how much ferritin iron each of us has stored. Hemochromatosis may arise in any decade of life, depending upon the strength of the genetic defect. A person whose parents have the gene for hemochromatosis may develop signs of iron overload very early in life, while others may not develop elevated ferritin levels until the fifth or sixth decade of their lives. The most important thing for all of us is to have our ferritin blood levels checked from time to time during our adult lifetimes to avoid showing up in a doctor's office with unexplained diabetes, heart failure, or liver damage. While iron overload is a genetic disorder and both men and women can develop the iron storage problem, the truth is that one gender is much more likely than the other to develop signs and symptoms of iron overload. Women begin having menstrual blood loss in their early teenage years and therefore lose iron every month for nearly 40 years. During this time, women also give birth to children, and this also accounts for a large loss of iron from a woman's body. It is unlikely, therefore, for women, even those who have the gene for hemochromatosis, to develop organ damage from iron overload as long as they're continuing to have menstrual periods. The truth is that women, throughout the majority of their lives, tend to have iron deficiency because of menstrual blood loss, and often they need to take iron supplements to keep up the normal production of hemoglobin. Many women, therefore, develop anemia, a low red blood count, only because of iron deficiency. Men, on the other hand, do not have sources of iron loss from the body and are much more likely, when they have the hemochromatosis gene, to develop iron overload and related organ damage. Men also eat more food by volume than do women, and they are likely to eat large amounts of iron-rich diet and therefore become iron overloaded. Well, why is iron overload so important? Obviously, none of us want to show up at the hospital with cirrhosis of the liver, diabetes, or heart failure. Biochemists also have taught us over the past 30 years that iron, which is a heavy metal, like lead and cadmium and arsenic, may react with oxygen to form free radicals in our bodies. Free radical damage is one of the proposed mechanisms by which chronic inflammation may cause development of chronic diseases, like atherosclerosis of the linings of our arteries. If this is true and iron is a provider of free radical material, then excess of iron may cause far more than just the 3 diseases already mentioned. The normal range for ferritin in the American men is around 40 to 380 nanograms per ml of blood. For normal American women, the range of normal is much lower. Several studies have suggested that ferritin levels high in the normal range may place us at increased risk for diseases. The important thing for all of us seeing this video is that we know our ferritin levels and make sure that we do not have a tendency to iron overload. How can those who have genetic hemochromatosis manage the problem? In the same way that iron-deficient women need to take iron supplements to increase their available iron, those who are iron overloaded need to have an easy way to easily get rid of iron from their body stores. It turns out that the best treatment for iron overload states, regardless of whether the liver, the pancreas, or the heart have always been damaged, is donation of blood. When we donate blood, we lose iron from our bodies. As we reconstruct the blood loss from the donation, we begin to use up some of the iron stored in our bodies. In my experience, donation of 1 unit of blood can result in reduction of ferritin levels in the blood of over 100 nanograms per ml of blood. So the secret for management of hemochromatosis is that the donation of blood must continue frequently over many months or years until the body's iron stores are sufficiently depleted so that blood ferritin level is now in the normal range, and the patient is no longer at risk. The patient with hemochromatosis can have specific genetic testing performed at some expense to see if well-known genes for this disorder exist. This is helpful, but at the final analysis, the treatment of the problem is blood donation, regardless of the presence or absence of the genetic background. Those who have iron overload with a ferritin between 400 and 1500 nanograms should never take vitamins that contain iron, as this would obviously be self-defeating for the treatment of the problem. In fact, men should almost never take supplements that contain iron unless they are regular blood donors. Women in their menstrual years are much less likely to have iron overload for the reasons already discussed. Women after menopause, however, who have the genes for iron overload are just as likely as men to develop damage to their heart, their liver, or their pancreas. The important point in all of this discussion is that we can get too much of something that is necessary and good for our lives and our health. We should all know our body's iron levels in the form of ferritin and should expect our physicians to measure it as a part of our annual wellness screening. In our next video, we will discuss the important issue of whether our food is sometimes toxic to us. I'll look forward to seeing you soon.